You can see here that some of the larger professions that we have are the physiotherapists, occupational therapists, paramedics, radiographers, etc. So some of those very ones that would be very familiar to us. And then, of course, we've got our smaller professions, such as the art therapists and orthoptists. Kim, I don't know if your slides are moving for you.
Oh, my slides are being crazy at the moment. It's absolutely crazy. But there we go. Brilliant. It's absolutely crazy. I've got a big delay on my slides, so I do apologise. So I'm going to move on to Patrick now, and Patrick's going to talk a little bit about renewal of registrations. Patrick.
Perfect. Thanks, Kim. So hello, everybody. My name is Patrick, as I said earlier. So we're just going to talk as high level and as we can in the time given about renewing. So we'll start with some very simple facts about renewing, and they'll go through the timeline and character and health declarations. So it's every 2 years. All professions have to renew every 2 years. It's a 3-month renewal window. They have to make the professional declaration, complete it, and they have to disclose how they're going to pay their fee. So you can either pay up front or you can set up a direct debit to take it in installments. And at this point as well, we choose 2.5% of all registrants, of the registrants renewing, to take part in the CPD audit. And that is chosen on the first day of each renewal window. So a common theme we see and a pattern that we see is a lot of registrants always try to renew their registration at the end of the renewal window. This can be quite problematic and it's difficult for the registration team to deal with that many inquiries at that point. So we really encourage everyone to start as early as possible. A good way to think about it, the renewal window, is to think about the first day, not the deadline. And I really put that in your diaries. And we'll look at those now. So could we go to the next slide, please, Kim? So this is a slide of all the professions that are renewing over the next year. Currently, it's the operating department practitioners, and that runs out on the 30th of November. So if you do have any ODPs in your team or you manage any, please talk to them about it. I think that's going to be a theme for this session here, is really just getting to talk about it and getting it in people's minds. We do have people who get taken off the register and they completely have no idea that the renewal window has happened. Our reminders are sent by email and text. So if you don't update your details, there's very little way of us to communicate with you. So that's the other thing I would do. So the big tips I would say are to talk about it with your registrants and in your office with everyone. Put it up somewhere, the first date of it. It's always going to be the same time of year, every 2 years. So you can put that date, have that date in your mind, in your office somewhere all the time. And I think, yeah, that would be our big tips for you. Next slide, please, Kim. If you are taken off the register, you would need to apply for readmission. This does then impact your registration as well. Obviously, it impacts on your service and your ability to work with service users. A tip that we have here is again, it's just talking about it, making sure everyone's aware of it and knowing what they need to do. Even maybe putting in a meeting for the day that the renewal window opens and everyone going there, talking it and seeing where their status is. Maybe they need to talk to HCPC and update some details. Maybe they need a reminder email about codes to log into their account. But again, we would really encourage you to talk about this. Readmission can take up to 10 working days for your form to be processed. That's not even a guarantee that you will be put back on the register straight away. If the form is done wrong, we might need to go back to you. We might need further details. So it can have quite a severe impact on registrants' ability to work. Next slide, please, Kim. So this is a copy of the declaration that all registrants will be making in the online renewal system. All the questions are related to public safety. You can see that, and making sure that they are able to continue to practice their profession in a safe and effective way with their service users. So now we're going to have a little look at the character declarations and what you might need to consider for this. So this is a really, really useful flowchart. We will circulate this to you afterwards. It's available on our website as well in a PDF. And this is what you should really be thinking about, and registrants will need to think about when they come to renew their registration. I also think it's fair to say that, I know I do it myself, is that you can be harder on yourself than you would be with other people. So I think it'd be really useful for them to turn to you and have conversations about what they're thinking about declaring, because I think they'd be more inclined to be concerned and want to declare to things, but you can give them a much more objective, fair view of the situation, and then talk to them and can look at case studies on our website as well and think, really, do we really need to show this to declare this to the HCPC? Again, and then I would recommend documenting this conversation, and any evidence you have, it'll be really useful to show the decision making there and the fact that you did get a view from other people as well. And again, those boxes on the side of the flowchart, I think, are the most important for your registrants to consider as well. Next slide, please, Kim. What doesn't need to be declared? So this is an example that, again, it's taken from our website and a bit of guidance, and it really shows. Obviously, we can't have a list of all the things that should be declared or shouldn't be declared, because they're so far-reaching and they're so expansive, and we don't want to be prescriptive. However, this is a list of a few things that are commonly declared to us at renewal that we don't need to take further action against. So I think it's quite useful to think about as well with these sort of things is what the purpose of declaring them to HCPC is. It's about public safety. It's about bringing the profession into disrepute. So considering those is really important. So as an example in there, you can see parking fines. That's not something that's in public safety's interest. It doesn't really bring the profession into disrepute. So it's not really for something that we should be looking at, to be quite honest. Again, if you are in doubt, you can declare to us, but this is just to sort of show you that quite often we do declarations that aren't really needed. Next slide, please, Kim. Health. So again, people's health can change all the time. We're very aware of that, and it can cause a lot of anxiety, and it can cause problems for you at work, and it might change how you have to practice and so on and so forth. Again, please talk to people. I think this is the big thing. Again, you could be quite hard on yourself, and I think having this conversation with your manager or people who manage you is really useful. And again, it's those three boxes on the side of the flow chart that are really, really helpful. And we just want to see that you're managing your condition. That we have so many registrants on the register who are managing their conditions at the moment, and they practice perfectly safely and health effectively. So please, again, this is just about talking to them. And there's lots and lots of resources on our website for you to look around and really make this decision together with your registrants. Next slide, please, Kim. Self-declaration. So it may be that despite these conversations or with these conversations, you do want to declare to HCPC. So we just talked about the fact that you make these declarations at renewal, but your health and your character can change at any time. So we always are open to self-referrals to the HCPC, and this links to standard 9.5, which is on the right-hand side here. So these are the areas that we would really ask you to tell us as soon as possible if these sort of things change. But again, I would use those flow charts. I would have conversations and really get them to think about what is in our interest as a body that looks at public protection. And we're just asking you to talk to them and consider the best course of actions. You can also use our guidance, and you can talk to us as well. There's a number there. And we really recommend that you do that as well, because we want the best decision. We don't want to be investigating people's parking fines. We want to be investigating things that are really important and do matter. Next slide, please, Kim. How can you help? Yeah, so these are a few little tips that we would recommend to you. So I think the first one and the most important one is fostering that open culture with your registrants to come and talk to you. So I said this numerous times, but it's so easy to be hard on yourself and to be a bit worried about what HCPC thinks and think, I have to declare this to them straight away now. But I think they need to talk to you, and I think it's really good to get that objective view on what is happening. You can help registrants by making the decisions together. You can use our guidance. You can talk to us, look at our case studies. And I think writing all this down is really useful as well, keeping good records. Adjusting or managing practice is also a really good way of managing healthcare conditions. This can be, working shorter hours, working part-time, things like that. That is managing your conditions. And then you can change that as your health changes or doesn't. Again, you all have local HR policies, and there'll be occupational health for health conditions as well. I think you should be talking to them, having more conversations about what you think is the best way. And the final one is documenting conversations, getting evidence in all kinds of ways that you can. I mean, particularly for health, it's likely that you will be seeing other healthcare professionals. So you can see what they're prescribing to you. You can see what letters they're sending to you. So you may have letters from your optometrist saying that you're still able to see certain distance, you can still drive, you can still do this. So I think things like that are really useful, and they're really useful for HCPC if we do have to consider declarations, and they really help us to make fair and reasonable judgments. And to end that was quite a whistle-stop tour of it all, I think. Our next session is around fitness to practice. So there will be a bit more in-depth discussion of health and character declarations and what we would be looking at in fitness to practice and what gets through to that. Thank you. I think we have questions if anything's come up.
Brilliant.
Kim?
Brilliant, Patrick. Thank you ever so much for that whistle-top tour, like you said. There aren't any questions at the moment, so we're going to move on, if that's okay. And Veshna, I'm going to ask you if you would look at continuing professional development, because I know that this is something that concerns registrants, and also employers need to support registrants through CPD, don't they? So perhaps we'd have a look at that, if that's okay.
Yes, thank you, Kim. So continuing professional development, or CPD, as you may remember from one of Patrick's slides, is an integral part of the renewal declaration. That is, all the registrants renewing their registration need to make a professional declaration, and one of the standards that they need to meet is a continuous professional development standard. Although it is integral part of the renewal, only 2.5% of the profession will be selected to submit their CPD profile. And on this slide, we can see the criteria based on which our assessors will be assessing the CPD profile. So they'll be looking into the list of CPD activities covering the 2 last years, that is the duration of the registration cycle. When we say the list of activities, it has to be in a chronological order, preferably, with no gaps longer than 3 months. That is, no unexplained gaps, of course. And also, we will be looking into the variety of those activities. So the activities need to be varied, not just one form of learning. Also, the very important standards 3 and 4 are about CPD activities contributing to the actual practice and service delivery and benefiting the service users. And the last CPD standard would be being able to provide the CPD profile upon request. We can see on this slide, thank you, Kim, that the most common question actually we get asked is what activities fall under CPD activities. One of our registrants said that everything they do is a CPD, and I'm sure you can all relate to that. However, we wanted to categorize the main 5 categories of CPD activities. So although they may often overlap, but it just helps think about what you do on a daily basis in those major categories, and that can be anything that happens at work, a reflection on the interaction or a service with a service user, any kind of formal education or certificate module attended, and so on, up to voluntary work that helped you improve your practice. On the next slide, just a little bit about how the CPD audit happens. It is entirely computer-based, algorithm-based, random selection. Therefore, it's not targeted in any other way. And it selects 2.5 of the entire registration pool, with the exception of those that spent less than 2 years on the register, because we want to allow enough time for registrants to collect a CPD profile, and it excludes those that are currently under fitness to practice or any other restriction to practice case. The deadline for CPD submission is the same with renewal deadline. So by the end of the renewal deadline, they are required to submit the CPD profile as well. And the possible outcomes of the CPD audit can be, of course, or profile successful. That means meets all the 5 standards. If any of the standards is missing or not fully met, our assessors will write a recommendation, ask for further information, but also write a recommendation and suggestion how they should meet that standard. So we are kind of trying to help and support the registrant to provide that further standard or more that is missing. They can also decide that the registrant needs more time, perhaps, to complete the profile. And of course, if after multiple further information requests, the registrant does not meet the standards, or in rare occasions that does not engage with us at all, we can decide to remove the registrant from the register. But of course, we consider that as an extreme decision, and we take a lot of consideration and time to make that decision. As an employer or manager, I believe a lot of it was covered in the first video from your colleagues, but just to reiterate, yes, it is a lot about being aware of this requirement, and that it is an ongoing requirement for whoever is on the register at all times, and just perhaps embedding those kind of conversations in your meetings with your staff, and just encouraging them to keep that record, because the main stress we get from registrants is the moment they realize that they actually need to submit that list. And rather than going backwards and thinking about it retroactively, it's good to encourage them to just take some time to record what happens in their CPD life.
Thank you, Veshna. I love that word, CPD life. That's lovely. There have been some questions in chat, but actually they've been answered, I think. So I think that's quite useful. And I'm going to link a fantastic video from one of your colleagues on CPD as well. That's a really good video, isn't it, for them to watch about what CPD is. Brilliant. So I'm going to move on now, if that's all right, to international applications. And Sammy is going to do us a little tour of the international applications process. The reason we included this actually was that it was asked for in the last session. So Sammy, I know it's your area of expertise, so over to you for international applications, if that's okay.
Thank you, Kim. So we don't have much time, so I'll try and go through as quick as possible. But if you do have any questions, then feel free to just interrupt, and I'll answer as best I can. So just to go through the process and how it works. So how does HCPC assess and verify information? So we expect all international applicants to make an application online. So that's pretty obvious. But what do we do when we get the application? So international applications are assessed by two assessors from the same part of the register to which they're applying. Assessors are registered members of HCPC, so registrants just like any other registrants, but they've been given special training to assess international applicants. The applicant's education and training is assessed against our standards of proficiency. And if any shortfalls are identified in the application or are not met through relevant education, training, or experience, we will request further information from the applicant. We also conduct verification checks on qualification, and we'll also do background checks by your regulatory body and membership or any professional experience you may have. So how long does it take and what's the application timeline? So in the last 12 months, the number of applications has increased overall by about 60%. So at this current moment, well, I think as of this week, we have just started hitting our normal processing times. But for the vast majority of the last 24 months, we were not hitting our normal processing times. So a lot of applicants were waiting longer than the usual 60 working days to hear back from us. We can go to the next slide. Okay, so yeah, so we aim to provide an initial recommendation within 60 working days. So that's the aim for us. But as I said, it is taking slightly longer than usual. So verification checks. So how do we conduct verification checks? So Kim, if you click next a couple of times, I'll just show. So verification checks, we conduct a minimum of 2 checks. So these are checks on registration with a regulatory professional body, depending on what you have in your, what the applicant has in their country. At least 1 relevant professional experience, so that'd be their previous workplace or any placements they may have done. And we would always do checks on their relevant qualification, just to confirm they've qualified and got the qualifications that they said they have. So an applicant makes an application, what evidence do they need to provide to ensure that they meet the requirements for registration? So the first and most important thing we always encourage people to do is read the standards of proficiency. So applicants are required to provide information that meets standards of proficiency, and the standards of proficiency are essentially what you will be assessed against. So it's always best practice to read the standards before you make an application. Therefore, you get a rough idea of how your application is likely to be assessed. Other bits of evidence they can provide are reference letters from employers detailing the nature of their work and the service users that they see. Records of any further training that they've done. It's important to have as much detail of the training. So a simple certificate will not suffice. We'll need to go into a bit more detail into what you actually studied in that further bit of training, breakdown of modules. Similarly with mentorship programs, any further education or course information, and of course, case studies. These are all useful and helpful items to help applicants hit those standards of proficiency and overall make the process of the entire process a lot more quicker and smoother for them. So our expectations of registrants, of international registrants once they join the register. So we expect registrants to work within their scope of practice, which is the limit of their knowledge and skills and experience. So just because you are on the register doesn't mean you are fully fledged and able to do everything. And this is likely to evolve over time as your skills and knowledge develop. When moving into a new scope of practice, it is very important registrants need to consider whether the training they have received equips them to perform the activity safely and effectively. And just to piggyback on what Besna was saying earlier, continuing professional development. So this is the way in which registrants continue to learn and develop throughout their careers, which is linked to their scope of practice. Okay, so tips for moving, there's a bit of formatting issue there, but tips for moving through the process quickly. So all international applicants, as I have mentioned, will complete and submit their applications online. So this includes paying the scrutiny fee and uploading all their educational evidence. So this is a new process that was just recently introduced in May, and we're hoping that there should be an overall benefit to us and to the applicant, and it's a much more better registrant applicant experience. So some of the top tips, again, I've mentioned this already, but I can't stress how important this is. If you have any applicants, ask them please to study the standards of proficiency before they apply. This is what your application will be assessed against. Provide information that supports your application against the standards of proficiency. So make sure you are targeting each standard and ensuring that it gets hit. Read the guidance notes. Nothing more annoying than sending an application form that you haven't signed or dated and it gets delayed for that. Certify your documents. And it's also quite helpful to contact your referees when you're applying, as we will contact them. And we sometimes do see quite a bit of delay at the verification stage where employers or education authorities don't respond in time. So always best practice, just give them a heads up to say you're applying for HCPC and to expect an email from us.
Brilliant, Sammy, thank you. Sammy, there is a question in chat that I'm in. Somebody's asking, how do you account for the massive increase, or how do you think you account, because we can't get into people's heads, for the massive increase in international applications over the last sort of year or so? What are your thoughts?
So my thoughts, initially, I thought so I think the UK's exit from, so I think there's two things here. I think the UK's exit from the EU has played a part, and there's also been a much more targeted recruitment of international applicants by the NHS. So I think when Brexit happened, I think a lot of people left the NHS, which left big gaps. And NHS Trust, I believe, then tried to recruit as many as they could in the UK, then went abroad and started recruiting. So I think we've seen an increase, especially in specialised professions. That is the view we have within the team, but of course it's hard to say. I think without a lot more detail, without a lot more data, and probably a couple more years to see the trend continues.
Yeah, thanks, Sammy. Thanks ever so much. I know you've been working hard in your team to deal with that massive increase in demand to get more people onto the register. Really, it's really important for workforce, isn't it, in the NHS and healthcare.
Yeah. Just wanted to say as well, I think this month we've registered, I think it was just over 2,000 registrants, international registrants, and we're processing about 2,500 a month. So yeah, massive increase.
Thanks, Sammy. That's wonderful. It's a really quick overview, and actually those top tips are really, really useful if anybody knows anybody applying for international registration. Thank you very much. So sorry,
Kim,
Kelly.
Sorry,
yes.
Just before we move on, there was one other question.
Yes.
That I've been trying to answer some of them as we've been going along, but I wonder if we could put this one to Sammy too. Sammy, is a question from Natalie, just asking what happens if somebody has moved from their country into the UK, but they've never worked in their own country and they wanted to apply through the international route.
So as part of the application form, we do require you to have at least one professional experience. So they will need to have had some sort of practice in their country before coming over. Luckily, the vast majority, I'd say well over 90% of applicants have conducted professional experience within their program. So they would have spent 6 to 12 months working as part of their course, which we will accept.
Thanks, Kelly. Is there anything else that's coming up that we can?
There's some others. I'm just wondering about the time, and I'm wondering whether what we might do is try to answer some of them also outside. So we've been asked, what mapping do we do on the qualified training in other countries, so that we can work out how they meet our standards of proficiency. And then the other question that I think we've got here is someone is asking, sorry, bear with me just a second. If they could contact someone about overseas. Kevin, I can probably reply to that in the chat for you.
I can answer the question about the mapping if we've got time.
Yes, please, go for it, Sammy.
So yeah, in answer, we don't do any mapping. So we don't. So unlike UK approved programs, where our education department has actually gone out and approved the program at the university level, meaning everyone who comes out of that course already meets the standards. What we essentially do is a mapping process for each and every applicant from scratch. So we advise applicants to submit their course information form or course syllabus, as we call it in the UK. And essentially that works as the mapping process. So that's essentially the assessment process. The course information form and the course syllabus alongside any other further education and training that they may have undertaken or professional experience to help meet the standards. So essentially it's a small mapping exercise for each applicant.
Brilliant, Sammy, that's fantastic. And this fits quite nicely because I'll be putting on this slide our professional liaison inbox. So if you want to ask Sammy a question, then do email the professional liaison inbox and we can direct you to Sammy if that's okay with anybody. That's on the bottom of the slide. I know Kevin's asked a question that's quite specific about occupation department personnel, so that will be absolutely fine. And really wanted to flag here our professional liaison, a professional in practice program where we can work collaboratively with you if you've got specific issues that you'd like us to come along to and talk to your employees about. If you've got a group of registrants in any particular setting that you'd like us to come along, do a presentation at, some of the issues that we've talked about today, but also other issues, that's absolutely fine. Looking particularly at unprofessionalism if you want us to look at that, and it's free, so that might be useful as well. So that's our professionalism in practice programme that I am involved in along with my colleague Fiona and Kelly. We wanted to signpost you to our employer hub, which is a real fantastic source of information. So again, that information and we'll link that to in our chat as well. But all the links that we talk about today, we'll send you in a little Word document that you've actually got. But our employer hub is a fantastic source of information there for you. We've got to let you sign up for our HCPC quarterly employer newsletter. Kelly, I'm going to ask you just to take over now while I have a quick cough, if that's all right.
Yes, of course, no problem at all. Yes, we have an employer e-newsletter that we do. It's called Insights for Employers. It comes out about 3 times a year, so it will not clog up your already busy inboxes. And what we do in there is we provide some updates that would be relevant for you as an employer or manager of some of our registrants, so you'd have some understanding of some things that are happening, like new standards of proficiencies, the review we're doing on the standard conduct, performance and ethics, our fee rise consultation that's happening at the moment. So those will be in there, but actually the real focus of the newsletter is to explore particular topics. So our last one, we explored supervision, what makes supervision effective, how might you provide that as an employer, looking at some successful programs that are run in different employers, and we had some lead articles from colleagues at the British Psychological Society and also from NHS Improvement in Scotland. So we have different people contributing to it. It's quite useful. It's about sharing really some good examples of things that will be really helpful for our registrants. So do sign up for it if you haven't got it. I think you can use this QR code, which will take you straight there to be able to sign in. It's just pop your email in it. You can unsubscribe if you decide it's not for you. But as though it's not too onerous, it comes through only 3 times a year. And also, if you think you would like to contribute an article to it, we would love to hear from you.
You most certainly would. And I'm also going to say that we do quite a lot of HCPC events. We've got one next week on the duty of candour, and we've got another one on the standards of conduct, performance and ethics, and we've got lots of events on our website, so do sign up for those as well. We'll drop that email in chat as well, sorry, that QR code in chat for that one as well. Lots of events that will be useful for you. Our next event for the Employer Insights webinar is on fitness to practice, which again will develop on some of the information that Patrick was talking a little bit about earlier on about case studies related particularly to self-referral, which might be useful to you. And we're going to look at poor culture and bullying and harassment. So that will be really useful, I hope. That's on our events page as well. And this was mentioned earlier, there's a consultation that's currently going on changes to fees at the HCPC. We've got a series of events going on. So if you want to actually come along to one of those events and actually have a conversation with colleagues about the changes that we are consulting on to our fees, that's nice as well. And lastly, a big favour, as usual, if you could tell us what you thought of today. We've, thought about we've tried to think about what to include on today. We've included quite a lot about renewal, because we know that's really important for you as employers, about renewal of your registrants' registration. We've done a quick whistle-stop tour of CPD, and thank you, Veshna, for that. That's been really super useful. And I think talking about the importance of CPD, and the one thing that your registrants are going to be quite concerned about is audit. And I know we've had some questions in chat about CPD audit. And then Sammy's kindly give us a whistle-stop tour about international applications, some of the information about that and how to support people going through international applications. So we've covered quite a lot of information today, and we would love to hear from you about what you thought about some of the things that we're covering. And if you also have any suggestions for things that you'd like us to come along and talk to you about, or any other issues that you'd like us to think about as well, that would be really useful into our survey. It takes about 2 or 3 minutes to complete. So we're going to wrap up now, I think, because we've covered our time, and it's been a pleasure to be joined by you. We've had some fascinating conversations in chat. We will leave the chat open, so you will be able to access the chat after the event. We will send you after the event a link, all the links that we've used in chat, and a PDF of the slides. So we hope they'll be useful to you. But please spend a bit of time filling in our evaluation form if you possibly can. And if we haven't come to any questions in chat, I think we have responded to most of those questions in chat, but if we haven't, please do email the professional liaison service. Myself, Kelly and Fiona, we're very happy to take any questions, and again, we're happy to come and talk to you. We'd love to talk to you in person, to some of your registrants. That would be a great joy to me, to come and talk to your registrants about some of the areas that we've talked about today. So do leave now if you'd like. It's not a problem at all. We're not going to be covering any new information. I'm going to stay on the line just to see if there's any questions coming up in chat. But thank you very much for your company for the last 3/4 of an hour. It's been a really enjoyable session. Thanks ever so much for that. Take care. I'm just going to stay on and see if there's any questions coming up in chat, Sammy, for you that you can see. Somebody was asking, Sammy, I noticed that, was it 2,000 applicants a year or per month? And I think you said per month, didn't you? Yes, I knew you did, Sammy. So yeah, 2,000 a month. You're on mute.
Sorry,
Sammy.
I realised I was just on mute. Yeah, just over
okay.
2,000 international applicants per month. Yeah.
Yeah, it's incredible, isn't it? Really.
Yeah.
And there were some questions earlier, Veshna, and I know that you would have seen them in chat about the number of people who get randomly, and it's a random selection, I know, for audit. And I think I put that it was
yes,
2.5%, isn't it, Veshna?
2.5%, yes.
Thanks ever so much, Veshna. That's lovely. And then people were asking, a couple of people were saying they've been selected a couple of times, which is very, very unlucky, I would suggest.
Yes.
But they can contact you, can't they, if they're worried about that?
Yes, well, the answer to that is because the fact that someone has passed the CPD audit during one registration cycle doesn't mean they will be exempt from the next audit. So the audit will take into consideration all eligible registrants, and that just means that someone can get selected more than once.
Gosh, thank you very much. Yeah. Actually, I didn't know that myself, Veshna. Yeah. So thank you so much for telling me that. That's wonderful. And there's some links in chat, particularly a good video about registrants talking about their CPD. I think most people have left now, so we will leave the session now. But if anybody is still here, if they want to just complete the QR code, that would be useful. But thanks ever so much, everybody, for your time. Take care now. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.